Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by conservative commentator, and this is probably the biggest accolade of all, survivor of the American education system. Congratulations to you, Annabella Rockwell. Annabella, thank you for joining us. Your story captured me, and I said, oh my God, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I feel like a lot of parents out there need to hear your story. Please share it with us. You basically grew up in what I assume was a pretty normal way. But when you entered college, everything kind of changed. I think that's very frightening to a lot of parents out there. Tell us about it.
Laura, thank you so much for having me. And you would be surprised how many parents have reached out to me that my story is, in fact, not so unique. I just happen to be lucky enough to have made it out on the other side. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm an only child. I'm from New York City. So I was really close with my parents growing up. I was an athlete. I competitively figure skated. So I had, structure. I went to church. I went to, good girls' schools always, had a love for this country and just pretty, I would say, normal values. We weren't hyper political, but I think we were, we loved this country. And that was just instilled in me, always be nice to your neighbor, treat people how you wanted to be treated, like pretty normal stuff. Maybe that's extreme now. I don't know.
Now you're like fringe with those sort of thoughts about things. Yeah, that sounds pretty normal. And then you went to college and something happened.
Yeah. So I entered Mount Holyoke in the fall of 2011. Mount Holyoke is the oldest women's college in the country. When the Ivies were men's colleges, the Seven Sisters were founded. And Mount Holyoke was the first of the Seven Sisters. So when I got in, I was like, oh, I have to go here, obviously, because that's how we look at the education system. It's like you go to the best school that you get into, because if you have the degree from there, then you'll get the job and yada, yada. And that's kind of the whole ego that's tied into where you go to college. So I went there, really excited. It is a women's school. And as soon as I stepped on campus, I was inundated with all of these ideas, the first one being that gender is a spectrum, which isn't something I'd heard before. And, going to the women's college, I was a little bit confused, like, why are there all these students that are saying that they're boys, but we're at a girls' school? So that was my first kind of introduction to, transgender ideology. I know it seems like it was a while ago now, but it was starting even back then. I think that the liberal arts colleges, especially in New England, they are incubators for progressivism and basically incubators for all bad social justice ideas.
What year was this, Annabella?
2011.
Okay.
Yes. So, I get there and I was very open-minded. I had traveled a lot. And like I said, I wasn't hyper political either way. I was a, American, nice to everyone. And I get there. And at first I'm like, yeah, okay, this is kind of different. This is kind of weird. I don't know if I subscribe to all of this. My first year, my second year, by my third year, my junior year. So after I had kind of taken all the intro courses, I'm really entrenched in the school, in the social scene. I had a job on campus. I worked in the development office and the admissions office. I was on a sports team. And it had really been normalized in my 2 years there that like sexuality is a spectrum, gender is a spectrum. I'd never heard about the patriarchy, but this idea of America being a really racist, evil patriarchy was profound in all of my classes. And then going into my junior year, I took a gender studies course. And I think that's when I really kind of flipped, if you will, because this professor who had at one point been a lesbian separatist, which meant that she lived part of her life not even communicating with men. So that's who's teaching these classes, basically told me that I had actually been oppressed my whole life as a woman, and I just didn't even realize it, that I had experienced all these microaggressions. I didn't know were microaggressions at the time, but now she's teaching me that they are. So if you're 19 years old and you're being told that actually the world the cards are stacked against you, and you've been a part of this oppressive system, you start to think that, okay, everything that hasn't gone my way must be because of sexism. So that was sort of the first leftist idea that was really put in front of me, that I was spoon-fed and I kind of ate it up. Okay, this idea of feminism. I now, since I go to this women's college, I owe it to my fellow women to be a feminist, to partake in this, to protest. I mean, one of my history classes, we actually left the classroom and we were taught how to protest outside. We marched in a circle. And
Really?
this is a
Wow.
renowned academic institution founded in 1837, on all of the top charts, very expensive school. And super academic. So of course I'm thinking, well, all my professors went to Ivy League schools. All of my peers are so smart. They were the top of their high school classes. Like they must be right. So where I
Yeah.
was at first a little bit resistant, like, I don't know about this. Halfway through, I was like, okay, sold. And then I just started regurgitating all of these ideas. And that's when things really turned in my personal life.
Wow. I mean, it is really the tale of what you're right. I don't think it is as unique as perhaps I had advertised, early on in the show, but it truly is what happens to people when they go to these 4-year institutions. I mean, it's very frightening, I think, for a lot of parents because look, we know how easily influenced and really naive you are as a child, but even into your late teen years and early 20s. And as you said, you go to this place where you feel like, wow, all of these people are so, well studied and smart. And I'm surrounded by people, these academics, who you aspire to be like in so many
Mm-hmm.
ways whenever you go to a university setting like that. They must be right. I must have been the one who has been misled my entire life. And I understand why it is so easy to target kids who are in college because of exactly what you just said. So I imagine you then kind of got to a place where things really seemed very different to you. And obviously, you had communicated this in some way with your family. And from what I read in the New York Post, your mother had to basically call deprogrammers. These are people who come in and kind of take people who have been in a cult and kind of take them and say, wait a minute, everything that you understand to be true is not true. How did things kind of reach a point where your mom felt like that level of action was necessary in order to really bring you back to some place of normalcy and reality?
Mm-hmm. By the time I was a senior, I had been regurgitating all of these far left ideas, right? That this country's racist, that patriarchy is evil, that men are evil, that men are the root of all our problems, that mom, you don't realize you've been oppressed as a woman. And she would kind of look at me cross-eyed and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. You've had every opportunity. Like, what are you saying? Like, you didn't think this then. You didn't think this then. Are you sure? And being at college, the progressive incubator, you're removed from everything you've known and everyone is together. And so all you talk about are kind of these social justice ideas and it feels really intellectual. So it just becomes the only thing that you think about or talk about. It's almost like you become OCD. Couple
Mhm.
that in with 70% of college admins are left leaning. So it's trickling down. Everyone that works in college administration, they also had to study DEI and all that stuff. So they're just perpetuating it and representing it in their jobs. I got to a point where all of these ideas were so conflicting with everything I'd ever known that I hit a breaking point where I just didn't talk to my family for a while. And they felt the
Wow.
same. They were like, we don't recognize her. This is really unreasonable. And myself, I was in so much chaotic inner turmoil because I feel like the weight of the world is on me and it's climate change, it's this, it's that, it's all of these things that you see people protesting about. And I mean, these kids are misled and also they're in pain because they feel like they're responsible now for everything that's wrong with the world. And so I hit a point where I just wasn't speaking to my family. I actually never spoke to a deprogrammer. My mom was the one that, in this panic of her not recognizing me and me not speaking to her, she started to call these people because she said it was like I was a robot and she recognized it as if I was in a cult. And I actually do really think that the ideology that comes from these college campuses is very cult-like. And I think that you can even see that kind of trickle into like the Democratic Party now or the progressive arm of the Democratic Party is very, very cult-like.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that's a way that a lot of us feel like we have to look at so many people because you present people oftentimes with facts. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
look at COVID, for example, and even when people understood that the truth of the matter was that you could wear those silly masks all you want, they weren't going to prevent you from transmitting or contracting COVID-19 unless you had an N95 or KN95 mask. The rest of them, all of those masks with like the cats on them or cartoons or all that silly stuff, did absolutely nothing. Yet I still, Annabella, see people wearing them today. So it is very cult-like in its nature. Whenever you think about the way that some of this ideology grabs hold of people, they cannot, no matter how much fact you present them with, kind of take the facts and assess them and say, oh, wait a minute, perhaps I was wrong, perhaps I was misguided. And that is the really scary part, because I mean, honestly, thank goodness your parents recognized that this was happening. And I assume, having your mom, I talked to this deprogrammer or whatever. How did it go with you? Did they confront you with this, and then you guys had a conversation? Like, how did you come out on the other side of this?
Truthfully, they didn't speak to me, and I had to make the changes on my own.
Wow.
And I think that that's really important and really powerful, is that I had to be the one to be willing to change. And hearing the stories of people that still wear masks, like, I understand. Yeah. Unfortunately, those people really are brainwashed, and their pride is getting in the way of actually looking at the facts. I remember when I was, identifying as all these wacky things and a feminist and just so confused about who I was, I colored my hair. Of course, it was pink, because obviously it had to be because it's a virtue signal, right? And that's part of why it's like a cult, because you want other people to recognize you, okay, I'm in, I think the way you do.
She's one of us.
She's one of us.
It's all good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What point did you get to where you were like, hold on? Because that's a big realization to make. I don't think, it's almost how people who, are addicted to drugs, you could say, I'll send you to rehab all day long, but until they make a decision, they want to pull themselves out of that and change their life, they're never going to. How did it work for you? How'd you get there?
I love that you said that, because I see so many parallels between addiction and the chaos that, people graduating college are experiencing and feeling. I personally actually went through my own lifestyle change. So I did stop drinking. And that's a really big part of the story, because on college campuses, there's such a substance abuse and party culture that you're just not even thinking clearly if you're inebriated all the time. I mean, it's glamorized, it's glorified. You look at people like Alex Earl, she's the #1 TikTok girl, and she's super sweet and fun, but she's also talking about blacking out all the time. That's pretty standard college campus behavior. And if you're acting like that, then you're just more easily manipulated. So for me, I had to make the conscious choice to be okay, I am in so much emotional pain. I don't understand why. And I'm so overwhelmed with the state of the world. I'm just going to make one change. And I stopped drinking. And making that one change gave me the mental space to kind of take a pause and start to actually think clearly, which is so funny, because I say I was a liberal when I was drunk, because I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't seeing things clearly. And I started to establish a relationship with God, with a higher power. And as I did that, I realized wow, I've been so obsessed with these ideas. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, AOC, I'm looking at these people as if they're demigods. And so are all the other women in my life, or not my family, but my peers, my female peers, were looking at these same figures as if they were godlike. And as soon as I kind of took that power away and actually gave it to a spiritual being, I was able to see wow, okay, I've been so obsessed with this and kind of warped with this. And that's when I was able to just take a step back and really be okay, there's something kind of wrong here. But the truth didn't really click until 2020, seeing the BLM riots, that I was able to be okay, why are we burning down businesses in the name of empowerment? And that was kind of the first okay, something's really wrong, policy-wise and politically. We've been seriously lied to, and we're now acting out because of these lies, and we're hurting ourselves and we're hurting our country.
And so what happened with your family? I imagine you said you kind of disconnected from them for a while, right? That your parents were I guess we can't talk to our daughter because you're spouting out all this crazy stuff. And it's really hard, I think, to be around something like that. What happened after you kind of had this clarity?
So we started to reconnect. And the way that my family would say it is that it was almost like a chess game, especially when I was in the middle of kind of the height of the brainwashing, if you will, is that you have to be really strategic about how much you push the person, because you also don't want to totally push them away and into this path that's not actually them. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I was acting in a way that isn't true to myself. Like, I had gone to school one way, was completely radically changed into something that I'm not, and then am now out on the other side. So I think there's a lot of parallels with parents who are dealing with maybe children that are transgender. You know, if you don't kind of put your foot down and say, I don't think that this is you, then if you appease it too much, then they're going to keep going down that path. But also, if you totally put your foot down and they have no contact, then they may feel like there's no hope. So it was definitely a fine line between, you know, we can speak, but we're not gonna show up for you in every way that we would have, because we know that you're not being true to yourself. And I think that that approach was actually very smart, and that, you know, is one of the things that they were told from many of the people that they consulted with.
Wow. And what about your friends from college, your peers? Are they kind of all still obsessed in that like very liberal, progressive mindset?
Yes. So a lot of them went to Teach for America, which I think is why we're seeing a lot of these ideas in lower school, middle school, high school, and not just on college campuses anymore, because that's kind of what you're trained and programmed to do. It's like, okay, you're at this incubator for 4 years now. You need to go into the workforce and you need to change it. And you need to change it by policing what people say and how they think and how they act. So as a woman, like, your job is now to go into men's spaces and basically emasculate the men to be however you want them to be. It's not working out for our society, is it?
Yeah.
But jokes aside, yeah, I'm not really in touch with a lot of the girls that I went to school with anymore. Some of them reached out and were like, I felt the same way. I felt like I was basically beaten into submission to act and think one way. And now, after like being in the workforce for 5 years, I'm finally seeing things clearly again. But there are a lot that, you know, choose to be in relationships with women instead of men, because they still kind of believe this idea that like men are the root of all problems in our country, which
Wow.
is unfortunate.
I mean, it is scary stuff. I think, look, my kids are really young, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're in pre-K and in kindergarten right now. So we have a span of time until they even approach a time frame in which they would consider going to college. And I just wonder what happens, because you're talking about an event that started for you in 2011. Obviously, we're in 2023. So there's been a lot of time that has passed between
Mm-hmm.
there. I can only see things, Annabella, getting worse and not better. What advice do you have for parents out there? Because it is so frightening to think we want to do everything possible we can to help our kids kind of achieve whatever it is they can in life, right? And one of those
Mm-hmm.
steps often is a higher learning institution of some variety. Unfortunately, it really has become like an indoctrination camp in so many ways. To hear your story and to know how often your story is repeated all across this country,
Mm-hmm.
very frightening. What do we do? How do we get ourselves out of this? And what advice would you give to parents who may have kids who in a year or so, or maybe right now, are about to send them off to college?
So here's the first reality check. That's hard for people to hear, is that a Harvard degree does not mean the same thing today that it did maybe like 20
It's
years
true.
ago.
Yep.
And that's because these students, my former self included, are coddled in safe spaces. We start to have anxiety, like horrific anxiety. I mean, so many people I know were on anti-anxiety meds, my former self included, because they couldn't handle like the reality of the world. So your kid is not actually being prepared to go into the workforce and provide for themselves. They're instead being convinced that the world is evil and they need to save it, but not with tactics that are actually real or helpful. You know, they're not being taught to like, well, why don't you develop a relationship with God? Or why don't you read the Constitution, learn about the history of this amazing nation? We're instead told that this nation was founded on slavery and racism and, you know, religious intolerance. So I think that's the first thing, is just understanding that like things are a little bit different now than they were before. I think that if you're still giving money to your alma mater and it's woke, stop. I mean, just
Yeah.
stop. Like, look at Target, look at Anheuser-Busch, like boycott these schools. I mean, Bill Ackman came forward, the hedge fund billionaire, finally said something, because all those Harvard students signed a letter saying that Israel is responsible for Hamas murdering them. I mean, that's evil. But I think these kids don't even know what they're saying because
they have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw it and I was like, well, duh, of course that's what they're saying. I mean, that's what they were saying 10 years ago when I was there. But the difference is now people are seeing it. So you do have to put your money where your mouth is. And then I think if you have kids, it's important to just keep them involved, like in their activities, right? So one of the things that I was trying to find myself again is I said I grew up figure skating. Like I started doing that activity because it kind of connected me to who I was before I went off to school and was totally transformed. So I'd say like keep them in something extracurricular, keep them close. It's okay to go to a local school. You know, it's okay to go to a trade school. It's also okay to like give them money and have them invest it. Why don't they try starting a business or buying a piece of property, you know, Airbnb? Like there are many options instead of just going the 4-year college path. I also think so many degrees now are not really relevant to the workforce when they try to go into it. So I think that we can be more creative. Like this path of like high school, then 4-year degree, it doesn't have to be the only path anymore. And I think that as a society, we're starting to see that and accept that. I mean, there are a lot of people that are really successful, like Charlie Kirk, for example, didn't go to college. You know, he's trying to save the colleges, but he's been super successful just by work experience. I think there's something to be said to that. And I think the other thing is like if your child the best, and if they are kind of saying all these things, I think, you know, challenge them a bit to be like, well, why do you think that? You didn't think that before. What are you being told? And see if you can find the root of it, and also have another source. You know, I really love PragerU as a source for factual, you know, 5-minute videos that are really entertaining. I actually found them in 2020, and that was a huge part of me kind of like unlearning a lot of the nonsense that I was taught.
Wow. PragerU is amazing. They do an incredible job. I read also that you briefly worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016. So I got to ask you, were you still kind of like on the far left whenever my father-in-law won in 2016? I assume so, because you said you didn't kind of come around to things until these BLM riots. What was your reaction, though, whenever he won? It must have been horrifying for you.
Oh, Laura. I remember I was in a campaign office in Northern Virginia because that's where I was working. I was there for like the tail end, like the final few months of the campaign, which is when things are really ramped up.
Yeah.
And I remember I like refreshed the map on the New York Times website because obviously I was reading from the New York Times, the failing New York Times.
Yeah, where else would you go?
And the map went red, and I just burst into tears, and I thought that America told me that because I was a woman, I didn't matter. Like that was what I internalized as a reaction.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, and you kind of said it whenever you were talking about your time, like fully engulfed in all of this, whenever you were in school, that you were like miserable and you looked at the world as like it just like such a horrible place. I mean, I have to imagine some of that played in to all of this. Is this what our kids and all of these people who are like liberals and we're out there crying in the streets whenever Donald Trump won in 2016, is this the way they are seeing things? Is that what's going on?
Yes, they are personal victims.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It was horrible. On the flip, I mean, I am so glad that he won, and I was able to finally come around by 2020. And so I voted for his re-election, and I hope to vote for him again in 2024.
Yes,
So people can change. They can change, and they can see the truth.
It's so true. And the funny thing is, I never hear people going in the other direction. Like, when have you heard about someone who has been, you know, conservative leaning, who believes in this country, loves this country, believes in the Constitution, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? That's it. I voted for Donald Trump in 2016, but I'll tell you what, I'm going hard for Joe Biden in 2020. Like, it doesn't go the other way, and there has to be some reason for it. I love that you're so open with telling your story, though, because I think it is very informative to a lot of people out there. I think for those of us like myself, like, look, when I was in college, I mean, I think everybody has this grandiose idea, like, oh, we can change the world. We can open the borders. We can let everyone in and give everyone hugs, and we can solve world hunger and the environment and this, that, and the other. And you want everything to feel good, and it's so emotion based. And obviously that's why so much of what the Democrats peddle has to do with emotion, right? They're targeting people's emotions. It's so easy to go after easily influence people like college age students, like kids in high school, middle school, elementary school. We know they're already going down there. But it's just amazing to me because I remember there are certain things that I thought back then, and I look back and I'm like, man, was I wrong? But I never went down that path. And maybe it was just too early in the grand scheme of things. Things hadn't gotten that out of hand with our politics at that point. But I love that you're out there talking about it and giving hope to parents, because I'm sure there are parents out there, like you said, they might have a kid who's come home and identified as God knows what, a furry or something else. And they're like, are they ever coming back to me? Is there ever anything I can do to help my child? And I think your story honestly gives people hope that it's not over, that you haven't lost your kid, and that maybe at some point that, you know, their better senses take hold and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't me at all. This is who people told me I had to be, right? Like, have you had people come up to you and talk about their stories with this sort of thing?
Yes, and it makes it all worth it. It's amazing.
Wow.
It's so rewarding to have people come to me and say, you know, I thought one way, but then after hearing your story, I realized that I was just thinking the way that people told me to, and now I'm challenging it. Now I'm actually myself. And they're finding their voice, and I found my voice. I feel like, you know, in return, I want to speak, I want to share, and I do want to give hope, and also hope to parents that, you know, your children, you just have to have faith that you did raise them correctly, and then also be armed with the facts that, you know, the school system is out to get them right now. And I think that progressivism, they're so good at creating a common enemy and convincing people that they need to just band together because there's this fake enemy. And your father-in-law is such an icon. I just have to say that. I'm so grateful he was president.
Yeah, they don't make many of them like Donald Trump. He's very unique in that aspect. And it's funny because I know that I have friends, because I lived in New York City for like 16 years. And I know that I have friends who didn't vote for him in the previous two elections. And I kind of think they have come around to a little bit of realizing how tricked they were. I think some of it came after COVID, whenever they realized how dumb they all looked and how ridiculously they acted in that time. Because I remember one of my friends was like, well, we can meet, but if we could like go to a playground and I'll sit on a swing set, maybe we have the swing between us type of thing. And I was like, you know what? This is so crazy. I don't want to indulge it, but I wanted to see my friend and say hi. I think that there are people who are starting to realize maybe Donald Trump wasn't such a bad guy. Maybe the things they said about him weren't true. I mean, heck, all you have to do is take a look around, not just at our country, but at the world right now. And people are like, what changed? How did we get here? How did things fall apart so quickly? And so hopefully we have people who are coming to their senses around the country. What's your prediction, though, for kind of the next 10 years or so in America? Because, you know, we now have identified that there is a real problem within our educational system. I think COVID woke a lot of parents up. They were like, oh, my God, this is what my kid is learning, or they're not learning the real stuff. They're learning all this woke garbage. What do you see happening? Because it is a really kind of rough time right now where we have a whole group of people who have been taught that things that aren't, just quite frankly, aren't true. And it feels like everything is so tense right now. What do you see happening?
I think that the lights come on when people finally see the truth and it clicks and they realize that they've been lied to about something. And that's when they're kind of inspired to take action. I also think that people change when they are in enough pain. And I think collectively as a society, unfortunately, we're heading to that path of being in enough pain. As a country, I think both politically and emotionally, you know, I think politically we're able to look back at when your father-in-law was president and say, okay, we were energy independent. He freed 58 hostages without paying anyone. Yet here we have Joe Biden paying $6 billion to Iran, and then Israel gets attacked. I mean, if you can't put two and two together yet, like, God help you. I know that on our side of things, like, for me, knowing my former self, like, I need to be patient with people. I'm also just always available if someone wants to talk. And I think that as well, people need to be armed just kind of with knowledge, like especially with the school system. I mean, the Weather Underground, right? They were a far left Marxist group founded in the 60s, and they started on the campus of Ann Arbor University of Michigan. Like, communism in college campuses is not new. I think that people just thought, oh, well, it's not going to happen to me. So I think first is realizing, like, yeah, it can happen to your kid. It happened to me. Why wouldn't it happen to someone else? I mean, I was loved. I was provided for. I was always academic and an athlete. Like, it was pretty, well-rounded. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. But I'm also humble enough now to say, like, okay, it's a little embarrassing it happened to me, but whatever, if I can help people. I think in the next few years, as the world kind of continues to go in this direction, I think more people will wake up. I've even had in the last week someone that was a 2016 Hillary person and a 2020 Joe Biden person finally call me and be like, yeah, this is real stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and I hate that we had to go there. I hate that, but I always felt it. Like, whenever people, the pain element, like you said, is really what makes people change. I think about like 9/11 and how together we felt as a country, really the unity after 9/11 happened. I want to get back there because that's America. Yeah. That's who we are. That's really like the bedrock of this country. It's our people and us working together and supporting one another and letting people just have their shot at the American dream. And who cares what politically you believe? We all want the same things at the end of the day. But I've always said, like, I feel like it's going to take some massive, horrible event to wake people up. And honestly, the stuff in Israel, I think, has been it for some people, because I mean, that doesn't get worse than seeing the atrocities over there. So I hope we don't have to see more of that to get people awake. But I hope you're right. I hope that people start to get it and I feel like it is changing. I feel like the tide is turning. So thank you, Annabella Rockwell. Thank you for all you've done to bring light to a problem that I think so many of us are terrified by, and to really talk about your story, because it really does give hope to a lot of people out there that once they got a grasp on your kid, they can come out the other side and you're not stuck there forever. And I'm glad you saw light. And I'm glad to know you voted for Donald Trump and you're going to do it again. I believe you will do it again in 2024. So thank you for joining us here on The Right View. To everybody at home, as always, thank you for joining us. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. And we'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View. Nothing is worse than being on a phone call that drops. Nothing is worse than trying to text someone and you can't reach them because your phone is out of service range. And nothing is worse than supporting these major corporations and companies who don't support us. That is why I love Patriot Mobile. They are America's only Christian conservative wireless network. They use every cell tower out there available to all networks so that they have the greatest 4G and 5G coverage nationwide, and they support the causes that are important to us as conservatives. If you go today to patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump and use the promo code Trump, you will get free activation today. Again, that is patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump. The promo code is Trump for free activation so that you can get a great cell plan and feel good about doing it. So I'm like a lot of people. I love to wear an Apple Watch, but I hate how it looks. And I scoured the internet to search for the best looking Apple Watch cases I could find, and I found it. goldandcherry.com. They have absolutely beautiful watches, as you can see here. Everything is waterproof. Everything looks good with different outfits. You can get sporty, you can get fancy, but they are great quality, made out of Delaware in the United States of America. And they have been kind enough to give me a promo code that I can share with you if you want to get your hands on one of these as well. It's Lara T, Larat is the promo code to get yourself a discount at goldandcherry.com. And not only do they make Apple Watch cases, they also make great products for iPads and iPhones, keyboards, your desktop, everything you could possibly need. Goldandcherry.com. Use promo code LARAT so you can get yourself one of these today too. At The Right View, we're very proud of the fact that we are independent. We get to say everything that we think and everything that we feel. We have no woke companies guiding us or telling us what we can and cannot say. We are always going to shoot you straight and give you the facts as we know them. And that's why it's important to support independent outlets like The Right View. My name is Lara Trump, and I think Mike Lindell is a patriot. He is someone who loves this country, is willing to fight for this country. I love MyPillow because not only are MyPillows made in the USA by American workers, but they're great products, and they're so great that not only do I use them in my own bed at night, my children actually requested. My daughter the other day went to the closet and pulled out a MyPillow and said, "This is the pillow that I want to sleep with." And I gotta tell you, she loves it and will have nothing to do with any other pillow. So it's a big hit around our house. My dogs also happen to sleep on MyPillow dog beds. So all around the Trump household, we're big fans. If you go to mypillow.com today and use promo code TRUMP, again, promo code TRUMP, you will not only save money, but you will help us continue this show and other shows like it and help us continue the fight for the future of America. Inflation has impacted all of our lives. I don't think anyone can go to the gas pump or the grocery store without noticing that it is a major factor. And unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. It doesn't seem like it's going down in the way that we would like it to. And one way to protect your money is by investing in precious metals, gold and silver. That's always been a great way to make sure that you keep your money and you keep it safe. When you go to bh-pm.com, use promo code TRUMP. That way, if you decide you want to invest in gold and silver, you'll save yourself a little bit of money. We live in a time that's very interesting. A lot of us out there feel like a lot of our rights are slipping away. And if you're like I am and you want to have the right to choose whether or not to have a vaccine, how to live your life freely, and you're looking for a great doctor, I've heard amazing things about Dr. Sherwood. He's somebody who you should really check out and check into, and it'll help support this program and keep us going. So go to sherwood.tv and use promo code TRUMP. Again, sherwood.tv and use promo code TRUMP. You can save yourself some money and help us keep our program going.